A few years ago, I'd occasionally invite people to come and speak on campus, but it was somewhat ad hoc. And I decided last year to establish a President Speaker series that will run regularly so that you get exposure to, leaders in our country, leaders around the world, and to join them in conversation, right? Because I think it's one thing to be in a classroom and it's another thing to talk with people who are actually presiding on important matters in the world. And I was really thrilled that Ambassador Giger agreed to come and be the first speaker as I launched this series. And so, enjoy. Ambassador Giger.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Patrick very much for this invitation. I feel extremely honored to be here today. I'm overwhelmed by the attendance already. And as Patrick said, this is going to be a conversation. So I'm giving you some background about Swiss democracy because not everybody knows about it, and that's also quite normal. So I give you a bit of background, and then I really want you to ask questions, and we can also see how maybe some of the elements or some of the practices that we cherish in Switzerland can be of interest, to a Ghanaian or to an African context. So I'm the ambassador of Switzerland, and I guess every ambassador who would come here, will tell you that their political system is the best in the world. That's part of our job description, right? But what I would say is that let the people speak, and there are regular surveys around the world where they ask actually the electorate, whether they think that their political system delivers, whether they have trust in government. And Switzerland is always, always, always at the top of all of these surveys. So it means the citizens themselves have incredible trust in the government. So why is this the case? Why are we performing so well? And I would say it's because citizens themselves are actually the government. Switzerland has gone further than any country in the world in really practicing democracy by the people. While in most other countries, you have representative government where you have democracy for the people. So in Switzerland, citizens have a huge say in politics. And hence, when you ask them, how happy are you with your government? It's a bit like a self-evaluation. How happy am I with my own performance? And hence, we are always on top of these rankings. So Switzerland is what in technical terms they call a semi-direct democracy. People in Switzerland can participate in decision-making at every level of government. That's also something that makes Switzerland unique. From the national to the very local level, Swiss citizens are involved in the governance of their country or their community or their region. The makers of our constitution, they were very suspicious of power. So they really tried to limit power at all levels. So there's no excessive concentration of power, and I will explain in a minute how we achieved that. And there's also a very high degree or a high capacity for citizens to really hold the government to account and protect themselves against arbitrariness. So how is the Swiss political system set up? So we have a parliament, as in Ghana, but ours has two chambers. So we have a so-called National Council with 200 members that are directly elected. And then we do have a Council of States, where each of our 26 cantons can send 2 members. Or the half cantons, 1 member. So it's a bit complicated. So, but we have 2 chambers. And what is special about Switzerland, that they have equal rights. So every single law has to be adopted by both chambers. And that already tells you that the cantons, so our regions, have a big power because they can block laws. So you have a lot of veto players in the game. So when it comes to our executive, and maybe one more thing I have to add on our parliament that is also quite different from many other countries. It is a semi-professional parliament. So a lot of the Swiss parliamentarians, they have actually a full-time job, and then 4 times a year they come to Bern, to the capital, to deliberate in parliament. But that has, on the one hand side, it has the advantage that these people, they do have a job, they're in touch with the real life, they know what worries normal citizens. They also have the technical knowledge in different professions. And on the other hand side, it also means you don't really have a political class in Switzerland. So politicians are people like you and me. So as I said, 4 times a year they go to parliament, but otherwise they're just regular citizens. Then when we come to the executive, Switzerland has also invented something rather unique. Well, it is actually quite unique. Switzerland is the only country in the world that has a collegial body as the government. So our government consists of only 7 ministers, and that seems record-breaking when you compare it to Ghana, right? So we have only 7 ministers, 7 super ministries that they had, and each of these 7 ministers, they're called federal councillors, have the same rights and powers. And they meet once to twice a week and take decisions as a collective body. So every decision is taken in consensus. And we do have a president, and he or she it's on a rotating basis. So everybody of the 7 gets to be president, and it changes each year. And being president is actually not super fancy. It just means you preside these weekly meetings, but your voice is still worth the same as everybody else's, and you represent Switzerland externally, right? So that's also something that I think is very interesting, and I'm always intrigued by the fact or puzzled by the fact that no one else tried to copy so far, the Swiss models. So Switzerland really has, with that being said, one of the weakest governments in all of Europe and probably the world. So that also because the government is always set up of the 4 biggest parties. So the government is elected by parliament, and it doesn't really matter who wins the elections. It's always the 4 biggest parties that have their members in these. So the 3 biggest parties have 2 members in government, and then the 4th biggest party has 1 member. So it's always the same parties. It's always a multi-party coalition government, which also has the effect that elections are not that hotly contested, because in the end, you know already you will be in government anyway, and you will have to work with the other parties, and you have to work out a compromise. I said, already decisions are always made collectively, but then they are also communicated collectively. So you have these 7 members representing 4 different parties. Sometimes, of course, they have to take decisions that go against the party line, that go against their personal opinions. Still, when they step outside, and communicate with the external world, they always have to say, we have taken this decision as the government, as the Federal Council, and I stand behind it. So once the ministers become ministers, they have to serve the public good, if you want. So they will not be able to defend their party line anymore. There's a lot of expectations towards them that they work for the good of the overall people in consultation, with the other members of the government. Then one more thing that is really important to know about Switzerland, which I believe is very important for the success of our political model, is that we are a federal country, and we are very much decentralized. So Switzerland has 26 cantons, that's like regions. But each one of these cantons has their own constitution, they have their own parliament, they have their own executive. So they're actually small states within the state. So you have 26, that's also why Switzerland is called a confederation. It's the understanding that these 26 cantons have come together and formed a nation. So it's not top down, but much more bottom up. So we have 26 cantons, And then we have more than 2,000 communes. That's like the smallest, the communities or municipalities. And then you have all these political and legislative powers at each one of these levels. I already told you about the cantons, with their parliaments, with their executives. At the communal level, we also do have elections. So at the communal level, so the communal leaders, the communal executive is elected by the people. And in big cities, you also have parliaments, like in Zurich, in Bern, in Geneva, you have parliaments. In the smaller communes, it wouldn't make economic sense to have parliaments. So actually the legislative body is just the people like this, you know. So the people over 18, they're invited to an assembly where they can vote on issues. And Switzerland cherishes a principle that is called subsidiarity, and which I find also extremely interesting, and I find it surprising that not actually the European Union took it over from the Swiss, but otherwise it hasn't really enjoyed great international acclaim. And the principle means that whatever you can do at a certain level of government, like starting from the bottom, you do at that level. So it means our communes, they manage a lot of their own business. They raise their own taxes, and then with these taxes, they maintain public infrastructure, schools, you know, water supply systems, solid waste management, whatever you can do at the local level is being done at the local level. And then there are certain things that need to be managed at the higher level, like secondary education, because you cannot have a secondary school in every single village, or health services, you know, again. So that would then be managed by the canton. Again, the canton raises its own taxes and then provides all these services. And then actually the national level, the confederation, takes on only those tasks that are not already being managed by the local and the cantonal level. So this is obviously foreign policy. It doesn't make sense that the cantons, you know, engage with states abroad. So foreign policy is a prerogative of the confederation. Then whatever is customary matters, monetary matters, central bank, defense, these are the issues that are being dealt with at the national level. But you see, it's really a very confined array of tasks. That's about federalism, and we can talk more about that if you're interested in it. We also have a very refined system of what we call fiscal equalization, where like the richer cantons, you know, have to somehow subsidize the poorer cantons. So there's also a principle of solidarity within this entire system. So taxes that are being levied at the cantonal level are actually being redistributed among the different cantons. And then last but certainly not least, what Switzerland is probably most known for is what we call a direct democracy. So Swiss people can 3 to 4 times a year, we can vote directly on issues that are of concern to us. And we have, for instance, what we call a constitutional referendum. So every amendment of the constitution has to be approved by the general electorate in a majority vote. And also it has to be approved by a majority of the 26 cantons. Only then will a constitutional amendment be possible. The same is true for some important international treaties, so our government can actually not sign these treaties before asking the electorate for approval. Then we also have a so-called optional referendum. What it means, so Parliament passes a law, and then some people are not happy with the law. They think the Parliament didn't do a good job. So if they collect 50,000 signatures from citizens within 3 months, they can challenge that law and they can make a counter proposal. And then this comes again before the electorate, and the electorate can say, no, we don't actually like what the Parliament did, so we don't want this law, and it will be rejected. So that the optional referendum has been applied in only 7% of all proposed bills by Parliament since 1874 when it was introduced. So you may say it's not that important, it's only 7% of the laws that or either the Swiss Parliament is just doing a tremendous job, so no one really feels they have to challenge it. But actually, what is even more important is that the 93% of the laws that are being passed that are not being challenged, they are not being challenged because the Swiss parliamentarians and the government, they know there is this weapon called optional referendum. So when they draft a law, they have to be extremely conscious of all the interest groups out there, and they have to consult with them, and they have to make sure that the last person is happy with the law, because if not, this person could just do an optional referendum, gather the 50,000 signatures, it's not a problem at all, and and challenge us before the people. So the Swiss Parliament, therefore, is disciplined to always try to consult everyone, and that makes our parliamentary process extremely slow and cumbersome, but at the same time, it really helps to have this bigger societal approval of the laws that are being passed in Parliament. So we can say that the referendums that we have in Switzerland, they really have a restraining effect on politicians. And then one last thing that we have in Switzerland is the so-called popular initiative. You don't need to worry about the terms, but it means that 100,000 people, if you have the signatures of 100,000 people, you can propose an amendment of the constitution. And for instance, Switzerland's membership to the UN, which is only 22 years back, 2002, was actually based on a popular initiative. Some people said, look, it's time for Switzerland to join the United Nations, and it was approved by the people and by the cantons, and now we are part of the UN. A few last things to say about kind of the democratic culture in Switzerland. We have a system that we call concordance. It means exactly what I explained before, that our politicians really try to integrate as many different groups, interests as possible into the political decision-making process. And they do that not just because they're good people, but because really they want to make sure that there will be no fundamental opposition to their projects. So the entire political process, if you want so, is really geared towards reaching a compromise. It's the opposite of winner takes all. It's actually everybody wins a little bit, but also everybody loses a little bit. And there are people who say, well, this is because of a particular Swiss culture, we are also prone to compromise and all that. But I'm convinced that that's not the case, because in other areas, when it doesn't come to politics, Swiss are not more open to compromise than other people. I really do believe that our specific political culture is a result of the institutions that we have built over the years. And of course, then you have a virtuous circle where institutions form a certain political culture, and then that political culture again reinforces the institution. So in Switzerland, I think it's really three sets of institutions that promote and foster this compromise culture. It's the referendum challenge, what I just explained you. So the fact that the citizens can always challenge laws, so that pushes politicians to reach a compromise. Then we have a strong influence of the cantons, as you have learned. So the region, they can always challenge, they can block, they can veto everything. And then we do have a multi-party system. Again, you have different, and also we have shifting coalitions. So we have, I don't even know, but we have probably 7-8 parties in parliament, maybe even more. It also changes a bit from election to election. But then when it comes to the passing of certain laws or debating certain issues, you have shifting majorities. You have you can be a very small party in parliament, but by allying yourself with the bigger parties, you can have very, very wins in parliament. While you can be a very strong party, you can be the strongest parties after the elections, but you don't find allies in parliament. So in the end, you lose all your fights in parliament. So I think also the multi-party system helps a lot, because you always have to forge alliances. How did we get there? Because we know when I especially look at Ghana, it's a highly majoritarian system. You have a first past the post voting system, so it means really the winner takes all. You have very, strong fights, for parliamentary seats. So it's really a bit, die-hard competition. So how did we in Switzerland design a different system? And actually, Switzerland started out as a partly majoritarian system as well. So in our constitution, 1848, we also had a majoritarian voting system. And it was only over the years that we developed, these other institutions that I mentioned. And it was mostly like the cantons, because we were already a federal state, it was the cantons pushing for more influence. And so it was other parties. Switzerland was actually a one-party state for the first 43 years of our democratic institutions. So from 1848 until 1891, we're just one party in government. And then over the years, more and more parties came on board. And as I said, now we are at 4 parties in government. We introduced, that was in 1919, we introduced a proportional election system. Thanks to that, we do have a multi-party system now. We introduced the popular initiative in 1891. So you see, like, slowly but surely, we transitioned to this more integrative, more inclusive, and more consensual political system. I think that's it for me. I will stop with that. I think if a few of the takeaways, I do believe in institutions, and I do believe in the power of institution, to shape behavior. I do believe that, a political culture develops over the years, but it all starts with putting in place the right institutions. And that's, of course, easier said than done, because, as I said, in Switzerland, we had the advantage that we had always very strong cantons, that pushed from below. So you need to have these players in the system that see, that really advocate for a more integrative, more inclusive system. If you don't have that, and we can discuss that, then it's going to be very difficult to break an existing system from the inside. So you can have certain lock-in effects. And again, I have also maybe just as my final point, it took Switzerland almost 100 years, from our first constitution in 1848 until we have the kind of democracy that we practice now, with all the elements and all the veto players. Yes, probably it takes also some patience, in building really a democracy that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simone. We will take questions, but before we do, I will ask some questions, and then I'll ask Patrick to chip in when he can. So I had a few things that struck me as you spoke. One of the things that struck me was the federalization and the fiscal equalization principle. Mm-hmm. Because in Ghana, when we were setting up in the pre-independence days, Asante, in the middle of Ghana, very strongly pushed for a federal system. And part of the reason they did that is because a lot of our resources are concentrated in the region of their influence. And they felt that it was sort of unfair to them to have to carry everybody else on their back. But I noticed that I was going to ask if you had an equal distribution of resources, then you talked about fiscal equalization. So how do you manage that? How do you manage to get to a point where the richer cantons don't resent the work that they're doing on behalf of the poorer cantons in terms of revenue?
Very interesting question. And it reminds me actually, because I'm actually a scholar of the former Soviet Union, and how the former Soviet Union actually fell apart because of the richer, the richer republics, like in the Baltics, feeling like, we are paying too much, because the Soviet Union was actually something a bit like a federation, not unlike, Switzerland. So they also had a fiscal equalization, but to a much larger degree. And it fell apart because the richer republics said, like, look, we are not getting what we like. We are paying too much into the system. We are not getting back anything from it. And that's how it fell apart. So I think in Switzerland, we have somehow found a good balance. So it's also like the richer cantons are still richer than the others, right? After the fiscal equalization. So they are feeling like, they're paying a fair share. I don't have the figures here, but it's not, that they're giving half of their tax income, into this system. And it's also that it's only, I think, 7 cantons that actually pay in, and all the other 19 are benefiting. So you have a coalition of cantons that are much, more powerful. And then also actually the national state, the confederation, is also paying in, is somehow subsidizing, if you want so. So I don't really know historically. That's actually something I could look into. I find it very interesting. But I think it's again about finding a compromise. Like probably there was lengthy consultations with everyone, right? Where they defined, when you are at a certain threshold, you become a net contributor. But then you try to make this contribution modest enough so these cantons, still have an interest to be part of Switzerland. And then also it helps, and that we have to say Switzerland is also one of the most prosperous countries in the world. So since the Second World War, we had economic growth that was quite impressive. And I think there was always, each year there was more to share. And of course, it's very easy to build such a system when you're growing, because everybody still feels they're gaining. If you're in a recession and you're trying to do such an equalization system, I think it will be tremendously more challenging.
Thank you so much for that. I was thinking about participation, and participation seems to be the key word of the Swiss configuration. And I'm wondering about the smaller parties. So Parliament is made up of the 4 biggest parties.
The government.
The government is made up of the 4 biggest parties, and the small parties must align with the big party to get a voice. How small do they become, and how useful is their voice? Is there a space for new parties to develop? And independence, is there any chance of a person being an independent in the Swiss system?
Yeah. Since, a lot of the lawmaking is taking place at the cantonal level, a lot of decisions are being taken at the cantonal level. So, I don't even know if, that's another interesting question I should count once. If you would go into every single canton and count the parties, some of them are just active in 1 or 2 cantons. We must have hundreds of parties in Switzerland, probably. So there is always, thanks to federalism, there is always room for parties at the cantonal level. But then also in parliament, we have some really fringe parties. Like in the 80s, there was a pro-car party, very weird kind of parties, like single issue, and they have, because it's proportional election, they have a chance to make it into parliament, and then they're in parliament for 4 years, and then they may disappear again. But yes, it's always the 4 parties in government. But then again, the government also has to consult with parliament. The parliament does the laws, right? So, and you can, as a small party, depending on your political savviness, as I said, you can always then also bring in your views in bigger coalitions. And at the same time, what people who are not a big fan of proportional election systems, they always say but then you have 100 parties and the country becomes ungovernable. And this is also very true in many countries, but not in Switzerland, because we predefined that it's always the four biggest, so we don't have like in Belgium, I think they had negotiations over more than a year and they couldn't build a government. So we never have that problem because we just said 4 biggest parties are in government. So I think we took a bit the best of both worlds.
The town hall system that you run where all adults participate, are non-citizens allowed?
Very good question. Again, in certain cantons, yes, especially in the French-speaking ones, in Geneva, in Jura. So there are some cantons, indeed, that they decided that non-citizens can vote as well, but that's up to the cantons. But there is also, I mean, I think this is something that will come and come more. So it's many big reforms actually in Switzerland have started from Geneva, Canton, you know. They were also the first ones that let women vote. And then now it's obviously all of Switzerland. So now they started with non-citizens. And then I think the others will just take a bit more time to do the same.
Well, I was quite taken aback to discover that I've been voting quite a lot of elections in the UK as a non-citizen because I was a Commonwealth citizen, and I wondered, don't they wonder we'll come and vote badly out of spite and go away? Because I know I'm living in a couple of years. What do I care if I make a vote that brings your country down? So, do you have a sense that there's some sense of fear or resistance to the idea that involving because also in the UK the things I get to vote in are local council things. Right. Would there be some concern in the Swiss system that because the cantons have so much power, that if non-citizens are participating at the canton level, that they could actually endanger the country in some of their votes?
Well, I don't know whether in danger, but, you know, it also depends a bit on probably the setup of the population in each canton. So in Geneva, you know, you obviously have a lot of, you know, Geneva is also the European HQ of the United Nations. So you have a lot of expats from all over the world with like good education, all that. So there are other cantons where like your non-residents would be mostly asylum seekers. And then you also don't know how long asylum is always like limited. So you don't know how long will they stay in the country. Are they really committed to so I would say it also depends a bit on that. Since our political system is like so special and so different, I think we're always a bit hesitant to let like non-resident or like non-citizens in because we think that, it's so hard to understand, you know, they wouldn't get it. Like it's a bit like a national pride thing. But again, I think the more and more, you know, like as you say, the non-citizens show that, yes, they're able, you know, to participate in the votes and all that, I think, again, as I said, it will. But there is certainly also that hesitancy, and that's why it's only a few cantons that are practicing that at the moment.
So about the collective responsibility of the federal collegial council. In the UK, they have a posture when a minister disagrees with a government position, they have to resign. That's the only option. They're not allowed to criticize the position in public. It's called collective responsibility. From what you said about the Swiss model, they have to stand behind the government. What if they don't want to?
That has never happened. I mean, that's again, I don't know. That has really never happened because you know when you stand for like a ministerial position, you know that these are the rules of the game. So in all the history, no, has never happened. So you know what what you're getting into, and so you wouldn't dare to disagree.
Wow. I'm really impressed because I think of something like, shall we join the war effort in Iraq? But I mean, it's the sort of thing that if I felt really strongly about, I wouldn't want to stand behind the council's decision. But I have no choice. I can't lead and I can't but stand behind it.
No, but that's also why in our government, I guess the politicians that get elected, they're maybe not like, okay, don't cite me on this one, but maybe not the strongest, you know, politicians in the party. But it's really like the parties would put forward these like candidates where they feel like all the other parties would also agree. So it's always, even when selecting like candidates for ministerial positions, it's already a compromise candidate, because in the British system, it's just like the party won, like Prime Minister puts in his people, right? In a Swiss system, like you're being elected by Parliament, so the party proposes, and actually the candidates, even before they are officially elected, they do hearings with all the big parties. And then the big parties give feedback like to the nominating party. And they say like, you know, this one is our favorite, we don't like that one. And then a lot of times, of course, they're like the strongest candidates who have very strong like party lines, strong opinions, they would fall through because they don't find appeal with the other parties.
It's interesting, like even the party that's nominating takes feedback from external
from the other parties, yes,
so
yeah.
by the time they get into the office, you know you have a team that can work together.
Yeah.
Everybody has split in a way. That's a useful thought, actually. That's something that we should think about. Two other questions, and then I'll start asking you guys if you have questions. So the referendum, the optional referendum as a threat. The thing that I didn't quite understand about how it works is, so what if they take an optional referendum? So you pass the law.
Yeah.
60,000 people don't like it.
Yeah.
They set up a referendum, and the law is defeated. So what? Law is defeated. We move on. Why has the fact that there doesn't appear to be any consequence beyond the fact that the law is rejected, but somehow it keeps parties? I was reading a paper that suggested that the optional referendum, one of the reasons why referendums, even not the optional one, even the mandatory ones, don't happen as often as people think that they would, is because when parties go into negotiation, they say, all right, we'll take it to referendum if you don't want to bend on this, and then they have a deep conversation because, oh, calm down, let's have a chat. But I'm not quite sure why it works so well, because if you go and the law is defeated, so what? The law is defeated, the people change their mind, on we go. But somehow it works.
But again, in Switzerland, it takes like forever to draw up a new law. And again, it starts like with the government, and then you have consultations, and every single interest group there is in a country is being consulted. So it drags on, it goes on. It's not just that, you have a brilliant moment and you write a law. No, it takes like 2 years through. And then to have it defeated and start again from scratch. So maybe also because the entire process of drafting a new law takes so much. That's why you really not want it to be defeated then by a referendum.
I think maybe there's something Swiss about that as well, because there's something. People don't really expect laws to be passed in a really quick time if they're any good anyway. So I'm trying to understand why the fact that a law would be defeated would motivate individual politicians to say, let's not go down that road. I can see that this might cost the party some sway. But because it's a coalition government, it's every party's fault. And if it's everybody's fault, then it's nobody's fault. So how does it still manage to feel? Because often you have the tragedy of the Cantons, right? When nobody's going to be the one who suffers more for it. It's harder to get people to do what individually, if they did, would be beneficial for all of us. So how do you avoid that consensus system becoming a tragedy of the commons? Prisoner's dilemma, sort of.
Yes, but I think because the system, then like if you go alone, you have all the rest of the system still against you. That's what I was trying to say with like the institutions matter. And then we have practiced this now for at least since 45, right? So for quite an amount of time. So yet we have our locked-in system. So if you say like, I don't want to play by the rules, I want to do it differently, and I'm going to like just do it my way, right? You will have all the rest against you, right? Otherwise, we would really have to go to Parliament and ask them, why are you not, why are you playing by the rules? Maybe it's also a very Swiss thing, and that's, again, something that has been practiced over the years. I think we are very, like, if there are rules, we try to stick to them and apply them. We believe in rules, right? And the correct application. And so maybe that's also why. So don't give them like these ideas, please,
I wanted to ask about the MPs working. So one of in our constitution, our MPs, that's technically their full-time job. And if they wanted to have another job, they technically require, I use technically because it doesn't happen quite as it should. They technically require permission from the speaker that their side job doesn't clash with their MP job. The plus side of the full-time MP is the sense that they're completely committed to the job. They're focused, they're there, that's how they eat, so they'll take it seriously. And also that they'll take their representative mandate seriously because those are their employers. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that the practice is bearing out with theory, but that's the theory. Mm-hmm. How do you manage in a system where parliamentarians have full-time jobs, right, to avoid a number of things? One, them not being too busy to take the law seriously. Waldron writes that one of the reasons why we have a dedicated parliament is because the rest of us are busy. Mm. We have better things to do than to sit down and think through every law thoroughly. So we have a dedicated parliament so that it's some people's job to do that, and we can trust that they will do it properly if we keep them dedicated to it how do you guys manage the balance of people who have to find bread and butter elsewhere and have to make laws? The second one was, how do you avoid that becoming a root of massive corruption? Because if I have a construction firm and that's my job, and I also have a say in what contracts we're going, what air sectors we're going to develop, it seems an almost inevitable transition that we would start asking, what should I push? Maybe if I got the contract for that Ashesi road, that would really sort out my bottom line. So how do you avoid the corruption, and how do you avoid the lack of focus?
So the lack of focus, again, has to do with how our system is being built and how we draw up laws, right? And also the administration plays such a big role. And I think the parliamentarians, in the end, they don't have, as you say, they don't have to know it all. They somehow know, so it's the government that initiates the law. And then it first comes like to the administration, to the civil service, and then we draw it up, right? So, and then there's a consultation in Parliament and all that, but it's not all done by Parliament. And I think also they trust in people in the administration, and I'm a civil servant, right? So we would be doing the heavy lifting, if you want so. So they just have to understand what is in there and have faith that, we the civil servants are doing our job. And since it takes so long, and then every single interest there is being consulted, and once it reaches Parliament, then it's really not, I would say, not rocket science anymore. Then it more comes like to your party line and all that. So I don't really see a big issue there. And as I said, again, since we have a federal system, a lot of the issues are also, certain things are taken care of at the local level, at the Canton level. So less things actually come to the national parliament than here, where everything is negotiated in parliament. So the burden on our MPs at the national level is much lower. They deal only with the things they are supposed to deal with. And it's also much more immediate and closer to what because of that. When it comes to corruption, that is indeed, maybe I wouldn't call it corruption, although I'm sure there's also corruption, but there's a lot of lobbyism, of course. And or what we have a problem in Switzerland, that certain professional groups are very highly overrepresented. For instance, lawyers. Lawyers are overrepresented, and that is an issue from time to time, because so that is an issue because they have their professional interests. And for instance, when it came to banking secrecy, right, which we abandoned, but it was like also a lot of the lawyers, fighting that, because they were also part of the system and they had their legal advice, so. And then we also have actually farmers that are, and that may sound weird to a Ghanaian audience, but we have a lot of farmers in Parliament, and they're super organized, and which is also an issue because a lot of subsidies go into agriculture, and we cannot actually send a lot of international treaties because they would require us to abandon these subsidies to agriculture, and we are not able to do that just because the agricultural lobby in Parliament is so big. So there is a problem with lobbies, as probably everywhere else, right, in the world. But that's certainly something, yes, but we're very, I think also we're very conscious of it, and we talk about it, but I don't know what could be the remedy, to be honest.
The ratification before the president can go and take on treaties. So in our constitution, we do post-treaty ratification.
Yeah.
And the reasoning behind that is that we see the form in which the president who carries our foreign policy mandate has gone to negotiate. We get the actual terms, and Parliament ratifies the specific terms. If you do pre-treaty conclusion ratification, then basically you give your president the power to go and say yes to it, something that falls in this general idea. But as a lawyer, the specificity of the provision can very completely change the nature of the obligation. And in Ghana, we tried that in our first constitution under Nkrumah. He had unfettered authority to negotiate on Ghana's behalf. The result is that some of the some of the deals that we got, Parliament would never have ratified it in that context. There's no way that somebody who was standing for election could have said, I ratified this and could have survived it, thank you. But they were able to do that because we had pre-treaty negotiation ratification power. How does Switzerland avoid a situation where you tell the president he can agree to a trade agreement on umbrellas, and then he goes and it's on umbrellas, but it's giving away all the umbrellas of the Swiss people is what he went to agree to do. How do you keep that check?
So, I mean, like, again, we don't. Our presidents cannot agree to anything before the people. I mean, they would always have to go and explain how our system works to the other governments in the world and say, like, look, we're sorry, we cannot sign this before. Well, not on umbrellas, right? It has to be something of, like, significance, I guess. But yeah, they would have, he or she would have to explain, like, look, this is our system, and we are very sorry, but we need to ask the people.
But that's before they go.
Or when they go, like, in there, like.
So right, so they don't actually have the ability to sign the treaty completely unchecked at home. They have to go back home and say, oh, here's the treaty we've gone to agree to, will you accept it?
Yes.
All right, okay, that's helpful. And then I have one other question about the cantons. Canton identity. So in the US, for instance, you have federal identities in certain parts of the US being exceptionally strong, so strong that they sometimes are in conflict with national identity. Texas is an example of such a place. And in Nigeria, I found in some of my work that the idea of a native of Nigeria can be defined by a particular province of the federation, such that if you're from another part of Nigeria, for instance, you cannot be employed in the civil service of that department of the federation. I'm wondering about canton identity versus national identity in Switzerland. Given how much happens at the canton level, do Swiss citizens care about Switzerland or only about their canton? And how do you resolve conflicts between canton interests and federal interests?
There's certainly a very strong cantonal identity, and each canton has also their flag and their anthem and all that. Although some of them are like really small, and each canton has their own dishes, and we all speak in a different dialect. That's also like, we have super small country, right? Less than 10 million people, and then you have small cantons, some of them less than 1 million. But really, like, from canton to canton, the dialect changes. So where, like, as a Swiss, where someone is from if they speak with you. So there is, but it's more like a cultural identity, and it has to do, with the food you eat and as I said, the dialect you speak. But it's not really a political identity, and like. So the cleavages, are not really along the cantonal lines, and that's probably also why we don't see this opposition between central government and cantons very often. So it's more like sometimes you have like groups, or you would have we have what we call city cantons. You have like Basel, that is a city and a canton. You have Geneva, a city and a canton. And then they would like vote differently than the rural cantons, right? But then again, you have different alliances, and then they change. It's in Switzerland, the alliances really change each time, depending on the issue at stake. And that's maybe also why you don't have these opposition, because you may be an ally with someone completely different in the next, vote, or in the next election. So I think it's really the shifting the shifting allegiances.
But on very strong issues, like London voted to stay, and Britain voted to leave.
Yeah.
And Londoners talked for a while about leaving England. They talk, but they were quite resentful of having been forced to leave the EU. In a case like that in Switzerland, where London is also not a canton, it's not actually independent in the ways in which the Swiss cantons are. And to chip in a side question, what is a Swiss canton?
Okay, a half canton is just, a half canton is, so we have 26 cantons. Out of these, 6 actually have cantons. So they form, well, again, it's just like, they just have one member in the Council of States. But a half, it means a smaller canton. And then they together again form a full canton. But each half canton has a flag and a parliament and all that, yes.
It's amazing how you've been able to keep the union together in light of these clear identities. So now I have to go to the audience.
Yes.
So do I have any questions?
Given the rise of popular initiatives within the context of the Swiss democracy, I mean, what checks and balances do you have to ensure that policies are not enacted that, even though a majority of people support it, it will infringe on the rights of certain minority groups? And because Swiss constitution is interpreted by the people, so if there's conflict, you have to come to the people to say what you want. So for example, I don't like exercising. When I see somebody exercising, it gets on my nerves. And then I have a majority of the Ashesi come to say, okay, let's vote to ban exercise in the morning, people can go to the gym. And because most people don't like exercising like myself, we agree. But that infringes on the rights of the people who want to exercise. So what checks and balances do you have to ensure that we do not infringe on the rights of such people or such minority group? Thank you.
In theory, yes. I mean, you could indeed, start such a popular initiative. But then, as I explained, with the initiative, it means it would entail, if it's accepted, a constitutional amendment. So this, of course, always had to be in line with the Constitution. So you couldn't, I cannot recall, I cannot recall a case where someone proposed something, that was out of the Constitution. But it's, again, I think it's a very good thought experiment. But in that case, like, even when they are consulting, or when they're developing the popular initiative, right? They would have to make sure whatever they propose is in line with the Constitution, right? And then you would vote on it. Again, there would be checks along the way that make sure whatever you propose is in line. So if you don't like exercise, and that's fine with the Ashesi, whatever, statutes, whatever, you may do that. And then some people are indeed worse off, right? That such a thing could indeed happen, And I think that's also probably one of the, maybe of the downsides. It is like a majority rule, right? But then, since we have strong minority protection in the Constitution, that again works as a counterbalance to that.
With the use of referendums, it is possible that the voter turnout may be less than 50 in certain times. So how legitimate are those votes, and what can be done to increase such votes?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, actually, that's another criticism towards Swiss democracy, and we're actually not doing very well on many democracy rankings, because they also look at voter turnout. And since we vote every 3 months, some of our votes are below 50%. But again, you do it every 4 years, we do it every 3 months. So it's sometimes only 40% of the people voting. But everybody has the chance to vote, So if you opt out, and sometimes, honestly, I have to say, before you vote, you get a booklet where they explain to you, that's the pro arguments, these are the con arguments, and then they say, these parties are in favor of the pro, and these are again, and you read all that, and sometimes even after reading this, you're either, I still don't understand, I cannot make up my mind, or you say I really don't care, that doesn't affect, and then I don't vote on that issue, or I feel I would need so much more information to vote on this, and I don't have the time available, so I'd rather let other people decide, right? But you always have a chance to do vote. So I don't really see it. I mean, everybody, and you can even vote by exactly. So you know what I always do. Even now when I'm here, they send me all the documentation. I fill in the forms, whatever, and I send them by mail. So there's really no reason not to vote. You don't have to queue, and for hours in the sun to drop your vote. So no, so there's no excuse. So those who don't want to, okay,
My question is, based on your experience in Ghana, how do you see the issue of corruption? but, well, in my humble opinion, there's a lot of corruption in Ghana. And do you think we have gotten to a state where it's so much that little can be done about it? It's like when you have food and you store it for the following day, if it's just cold, you can heat it and still enjoy. But if you check and it's bad, no matter how you heat the food, it's just like, is that like sad?
Shit stuff. That's a good question. No matter how much you eat it. I would do that.
So thank you for the opportunity. My question is, the democratic governments of Switzerland have been recognized by the world as one of the most stable and good governments. But I want to know, with such record, why is it that no other country thinks of adapting to such a government?
On the corruption one, again, and I always say, it's actually not for me to judge, because some of you are Ghanaian citizens, right? So you're electing your government, you're holding your government to account. I'm just an ambassador in this country for a few years, and then I'm leaving again. What I do see in Ghana is that the accountability lines are very long. Like in Switzerland, since we are decentralized, you elect your mayor, you elect your local government, and if they're doing something wrong or if they're not delivering on what they promised, you see it with your own eyes, right? And then you elect the next one. And then the same at the cantonal level, you have this immediately, right? You know your politicians, and so that's one thing, So if in Ghana also, you could somehow shorten these accountability lines so that citizens actually think that they can vote someone out of power if they don't perform. And then the other thing that I really appreciate is proportional representation, because it means you don't only have two options, right? And if you don't like both of them, then yeah. And even if you have disgruntled citizens in Switzerland, so you have 5 parties, they don't like any of them, then someone will come up with an idea to build a new party, So it's much more flexible, it's much more accommodating to what citizens actually want, and picking up also new trends in society and all that. So I do believe the Ghanaian system, as it was designed in the constitution, is rather rigid. And I would hope that, that start by decentralizing power, start by also maybe introducing proportional election, all that. And then I do think you can also, then all these side effects of the system will slowly but surely disappear. That's my hope. And then on your question, why no one is imitating or copying us, Switzerland has such also a unique history. I don't think there's another state in the world where we were formed as 3 cantons coming together saying we want to form a state, and then more and more cantons joined until we're now at 26. So it was really, we call it a nation of the will. There is this very strong also sense of belonging together and being different, from the surrounding countries. We're never a monarchy, we were surrounded by monarchies, we're never a monarchy. And it's this, I think a lot of it is also with this self-built identity that we have. And maybe when other countries look at Switzerland, they say oh, but this is so special, we are so different. It doesn't apply to us at all. I think that, and then we as Swiss also, I don't think we go out and try to tell everybody how great. I think as a people we are rather modest, we love our democracy and we are proud of it, but we don't tour the world and say buy our democracy. So these are probably the two elements.
Given our impending population boom here in Africa, do you have any deliberate foreign policies to allow the people of Africa to collaborate with the people of Switzerland in the areas of education, technology, and healthcare? If so, how are you going about it? Thank you.
So given that the leaders in Switzerland are only in power for a year, what mechanisms or institutional structures are in place to ensure that their visions and goals can be effectively implemented and completed within that relatively short time frame?
Good. So first, the one on migration. And actually, before coming to Ghana, I was the head of the Global Migration Program of our development agency. And we've really tried hard, to work on so-called migration partnerships and have also skills partnerships with African countries. Unfortunately, I think the time is not ripe yet because Switzerland actually has a very high influx of migrants. We have been growing, I think, at the same pace as Ghana in the past 20 years. So when I was a kid, which was some time back, Switzerland was at 6 million, and now we're at almost 10 million. So we also have our own kind of population explosion. However, our migrants, they are mostly coming from surrounding European countries. So, but since we're a small country, it's really like, you want to take public transport, you won't find a seat on the bus or the train anymore. So we are really getting quite crowded, and that makes it difficult for us, to think about more migration to Switzerland. But I do believe that in the future, we are also aging and very fast. And at one point, since our surrounding countries are also all aging, we will not get this influx from surrounding countries anymore. So we will have to think further about, also these kind of partnerships with Africa. But I think it will be later in Switzerland than in many other countries, just because we're in this very comfortable situation at the moment. And then the other question was the president. So as I said, you have a 7-member government, and these people, they stay usually for 10 years. You also cannot, by the way, if you're not happy, that's also a downside of our system. If you're not happy with the minister, you cannot get rid of them. So it's the parties that nominate them, and if the party that nominated the minister says but we think he or she is doing a good job, they can stay on forever. So they have to retire themselves. Some of them have stayed for 14 years. So, but on average, say they stay for 8 to 10 years, and then they get to be president every 7 years, right? So they are again in this collective body, and as a president, it's more like you're the face of Switzerland abroad, but otherwise you don't have any powers. So the powers are always in the collective body, and maybe that's also something that always confuses. Here also Ghanaian president. To say I met the Swiss president last year, and I'm yeah, but that person is now president, so you're going to meet, this time you're going to meet another person, and then I think they understood now, but each time, so even if you have relationships with Switzerland, this bilateral level, and you're meeting on an annual basis, let's say you will meet another person each year.
So while I was looking into Switzerland's democracy, one of the first things that came into my mind was the population of Switzerland. So you are only around close to 10 million people. I come from a country, I'm Nigerian, where we have over 200 million people in our country. So if, for instance, the population of Switzerland increases to, let's say, 3 times what it is now, how exactly do you manage the system where the voting process is not going to be too long? If the average if the average person votes for 4 times in a year, the person might have to vote for more than that if the population size increases. So how exactly do you manage the system so it doesn't collapse?
I don't think that population really has an effect on the political system, And again, and I know Nigeria is also a federation, right? So I think that really helps also for bigger countries, right? That you can, although you have other issues, but you can decentralize your decision making. So even if our population grows, I think it's much more manageable because we are decentralized. We rather have a problem of space because if you see it on the map, Switzerland is really small, but I think 60 to 70% of that, what you see on the map, is actually mountainous, so you cannot really live there, or it's very, very sparsely populated. So the areas in Switzerland where people actually can live are already now densely populated. So we more have an issue. We cannot take in more people because we don't have the space for it.
In a space of chaos or war, who exactly does power defer to? Because if power is in the hands of the people and the people want to go in a certain direction, and there's a time constraint on the direction the nation needs to go in, how is the decision reached? And secondly, you mentioned that Switzerland came about by a sense of belonging. The people in the cantons wanted to come together. In Africa, we didn't really have much of a choice of how our national lines were drawn. Coming as a Nigerian, where we have over 216 ethnic tribes in our nation, this sense of belonging is sometimes not there. And I think it goes back to Dr. Mami's question of when people don't feel like they identify as Nigerian, they identify as a Yoruba person or as an Igbo person, how can you expect these people to vote or have an active part or membership in your governance?
Good questions. On the first one, indeed, it was a very topical question during the COVID crisis. And what we did there was, so our government got like exceptional powers for as long as, so they were like by law, they were given like the rights, to manage the crisis and not to go back, to the people each time. But that was then by law, it was time limited. And then when they wanted to extend, then the parliament said, no, like you had enough. So again, also they're very, as I said, we don't want anyone to get too much to control for too long. Your second question, and I actually once, like long time back at the university, I wrote a paper on nation building in Nigeria. And that's probably why also a lot of people say that, whatever you've done in Switzerland is like amazing, but it doesn't apply to us. We did have our challenges and we had our civil wars and all that, but again, we had like 150 years in the end, to build what we have, and we have 4 languages and we're much smaller. So, honestly, I don't have the answer. It's very hard, and I also, when I know Ghana, of course, better than Nigeria, but when I look at Ghana, where you also have more than 15 languages and so many, especially when you go to the north, they speak a different language in each village, and you're like, how did they manage, to do? I do think in Ghana there is a sense of identity. People feel proud, when the Black Stars play or what. You have a sense of identity, of pride in your nation. It's like, and I'm always amazed, and I always say like, what also, you have to give some credit to your people and to your politicians for like maintaining these polities for so long under tremendously difficult circumstances, is already something. But I just want to say, like, let's try to be optimistic and see whether, even more can be done. And I do believe that once the system is performing and you have, a democracy where you feel you have a stake in and your economy performs, I also do believe then, like, the national identity is kind of a side effect, because you're like, I want to be part of this country, but it's look, what we've achieved, look where we're going to. So it's probably also that with success makes like identity much easier, I would say.
So since initiatives are passed from down to top, how do you combat insider trading? And the second question is, looking at some governments have issues with immigration. How do you guys control people coming into your country and people going by the route of using citizenship by investments if you do offer it?
Yeah. Can you, the first one on insider trading, can you elaborate on that? I'm not sure if I understood what you're hinting at.
Okay, so in some cases in the US, when the Senate, when they go and something is passed, right? Some people in there will go and place their trade for a certain commodity or something, or they'll buy more stocks in X company because the regulations are going to favor that company. So how do you guys combat that with that down to top approach, where you have various initiatives being passed? So if those people in positions
all taking their bets, then it goes against the populace in question, and other people get to enjoy it.
Okay, maybe on the popular initiative, actually, you know, most of them never, I mean, first of all, popular initiatives are only possible to change the constitution. That already limits kind of, you know, the areas where you can launch one. And then I think less than 10% of them are ever being accepted. So, you know, exactly because of what you're saying. There's like a small group that says like, you know, like there was one a few years back on the legalization of marijuana, right? So it was the young people who said, wouldn't that be a cool thing? And they launched an initiative and it would have been in our constitution, but then there was a majority that said no, right? So you always have to have the majority of the voting. So that, I don't see that issue really. Immigration, again, you know, we're like in the middle of Europe, so we are part of the Schengen zone. And actually, if people want to immigrate to Switzerland, they would immigrate to Switzerland to other countries, right? So we're not like Italy or Greece, right? We're not like the first, the first entry point. So, and we work very closely with the other Schengen states. And so immigration, as I said, in Switzerland is actually mostly from our surrounding, from the neighboring countries, and not so much from farther abroad.
Switzerland practices that direct democracy, which involves the citizen from the bottom top approach. I wanted to know what the major challenges are currently facing direct democracy. And also, I wanted to know how the Swiss government ensures transparency and accountability amongst its part-time MPs.
So I was reading about Swiss direct democracy and I came across something that was interesting. The delay in women's suffrage in Switzerland. I read that the first cantons to give women the right to vote, VOD, only did so in 1959, and Appenzell Ausserrhoden only gave women the right to vote in 1989, and Innerrhoden had to be done in 1990 by order of the Supreme Court. So my question is, does direct democracy as practiced by the Swiss have the flaw in that beneficial reforms might be rejected by the people because they're prejudiced against them?
I think it's very good because I can take these two together. Yes, I think that's an inherent flaw of direct democracy, that in the end we always take the right decisions, but they take so much longer, you know, than in other places. And probably there was a question, why do other countries not imitate Switzerland? Because I guess a lot of politicians don't really have an interest in that because they feel like, you know, the people will be holding us back, you know, or so it takes more time for everything, and it's especially with the women's right to vote. That is something we are absolutely not proud of as Swiss. It was the male population that had to give, you know, the voting rights to women, and they felt like, they didn't require that. However, nowadays no one would challenge that anymore, right? But that's, and that comes actually to the intergenerational question. It's another issue when like nowadays, in a globalized world and with like issues like climate change, you know, you have a lot of global problems that you cannot solve as a nation alone, but you have to work with others. And a lot of them do have intergenerational implications, right? So you have to also, as a politician, you have to think about the next generation and the generation after them. And in our model, this is a bit of a problem because it's so localized and it's in a way parochial, if you want. So it's very hard, you know, then, or your question with international treaties, right? So then all the states negotiate something and then the Swiss cannot adhere to because we first have to go back and ask the people. So there is this holding back effect that should not be underestimated, and is certainly one of the disadvantages of our political system.
I am out of time. I am sadly out of time. This has been a fantastic conversation, but I am out of time. We will note your your interest in thinking about this further as we think through over the years activities that we organize for thinking together as a group.
Your Excellency, Swiss Ambassador, President Patrick, faculty, students, and our honored guests. Good morning. My name is Timbani, and I have the honor and privilege to express our heartfelt gratitude to you for coming here and sharing such insightful perspectives. And I believe as leaders of today and leaders of now, I think we've taken a few notes on what to include in our own good societies. And I think a highlight for me was when you kept referring or saying he or she, when referring to, the structures and members of leaders that I've been. And I think it's just really refreshing to see, especially in a world where, people are accustomed to saying he when mentioning leaders and all. And I think on behalf of every young woman in this room, thank you.
Thank you.
And also on behalf of the student body, as a little token of our appreciation, we'd like to present a small gift that we have for you. And so seeing that we've welcomed you into the Ashesi community and you're now part of us, it's only fitting that you have our Megandia and our Gia. And so
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish I had more time, and I'm super happy to come back anytime. Thank you so much for your very informed questions. Actually, you gave me some food for thought, and I have to go back and do some research on some of the tricky questions you ask, and then next time I will be even better prepared. Thank you very much.
That did very well. That was terrific.
Patrick, would you like to say a few words to close us? Thank you.
Very, very few words. Thank you very much for making the time to come. I can tell you really enjoyed the questions from the students. And for the students here, I think that, there's something that Madame Ambassador talked about, which is really critical for all our societies, which has to do with how do you decentralize government and how do you give more power or decision-making to the people. And it is a question that we should take very seriously. I just recently joined the board of a mining company here, and it is a company that is actually the biggest taxpayer in Ghana. And so literally hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes paid to the central government. But if you were to go to the areas where the mines actually are, the communities where so much of the wealth of this country is coming from, and see how much of that tax money is invested back in those communities, it is nothing to write home about. They don't have the best roads. In fact, they have the worst roads. They have the worst infrastructure. They don't have the best schools or the best hospitals. And it is, for me, seeing firsthand a centralized government that is not really paying enough attention to the sources of wealth of this country. In this case, I'm talking about natural resources, but there's human resources all over the country. That's where the wealth of this country lies, and it's the same whether it's 200 million people in Nigeria or 30 million people in Ghana. And so I think this question is really important. And then the question that you asked, Daniel, I think it is, about how long it took to give women the right to vote in Switzerland. How long is it going to take for us to move from a centralized government to two parties to something that is more representative? It is a non-trivial question. Is not trivial even in Switzerland, where they have decentralized government. It's certainly non-trivial here as well. So there's a lot of important ideas have been shared this morning, and I hope you sort of spend time debating them and talking about them. And when you leave here, that you actually take all of this and actually do something with it. So thank you very much. This has been, I couldn't have wished for a better way to launch the President Speaker series. Thank you.